Yeah, it's not there yet. The input monitoring provide preview of our capture sources.
Input monitoring provides preview of all of that. You don't need that.
Okay.
It started though.
There was no timer.
No, it did. There was.
Okay.
There was
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So we're being recorded now. Are you ready?
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last lecture in this year's software engineering course. Today I'm very delighted to have a guest speaker. His name is David Burns. He's from the Mozilla Foundation. He's one of their chief testers, and he has been doing software testing in a professional context for a long time. Today he will be speaking about his experiences with software testing and how good testing informs the whole software engineering process, and he will be talking about very powerful tools that you can use to automate your testing process. By the way, the content of today's lecture is not part of the examinable content, and David would be very happy if you have any questions, and so please do interrupt if there's anything you want to know. And my hope in inviting guest speakers from industry is that you get some idea of how what we've talked about in the course so far relates to what people do in industrial practice. Okay, after this introduction, I think I should shut up and let David speak.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to kind of speak about how we do things at Mozilla, and how testing is so ingrained in everything that we do, because all we always want to do is offer a very high quality product. So today I'm going to discuss who we are. I work in Web QA, which is I look after the web properties for Mozilla.
What's a web property?
A website. I'm going to discuss what needs testing, how we go about doing all this testing, and all the tools that we use along the way. So currently, we have 6 employees, 3 contractors, and quite a few contributors. Mozilla is an open source project. So everything that we do is publicly available, every line of code, everything like that. So people can start contributing without actually having to without ramping up. They can just go into our source control and download code and start testing. So from the company side point of view, there's 9 people, which to be honest is not that many people. Because what we need to test is a lot. So there's Mozilla.com, which is always tends to be people's first port of call. If you have your favorite add-on for Firefox, you go to addons.mozilla.com or .org. And there's so much about that. I think there's been over 2 billion downloads of add-ons from that site. So quality around there tends to be quite high. And then if you get stuck and you don't know what to do with Firefox or Thunderbird or Fennec or all these products that we do release, then there's support. Again, high volume site that has a lot of people going to it. And then when you want to see where Firefox or Fennec or Thunderbird is crashing, there's crash stats. So that we all use this internally, but we also use this externally so that people can see how well we're doing. And then there's many, many more. There's getfirefox.com. All our marketing websites that revolve around we've just started looking after some red pandas. Red pandas are another name for a red panda is a Firefox. So we started looking after a couple of those in the US. We sponsor them in a zoo over there. So all these sites have to have, are going to receive a lot of traffic to them, and we have to start testing them really, really well. So for 9 people, this is a lot of work. Even if it was one person to a site, which I wish it were, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So why we test? Well, users hate applications that don't work as intended. If you ever try to use a browser and you can't actually get onto the internet with it, even though your laptop's got internet access, no one's going to trust your browser. People don't want hate it when their personal data just disappears into someone else's hands. An example of this would be a couple of years ago, TK Maxx got hacked. All their credit cards got stolen and things like that. It's a shop. It's a UK shop that sells clothes and other stuff. And so now suddenly it was because of a bug in the software that allowed hackers to get in. So quality needs to be quite high. And then if we take an example like Twitter or Dig or things like that, people hate it when they expect your website to be up, but it's not. So these are the main reasons why we test. Another good reason for testing is how many people here would like to have their own startup one day? What's the quickest way to lose venture capitalist capitalist money? Buggy software. If your venture capitalists can't use your application, then they're not going to give you money. They're not going to care about your application. They're not going to care about your startup. So this is why you'll see a number of startups have the idea of, we're going to do everything test-driven. We're going to put quality at the forefront of everything we do, from when we deploy to how we deploy and things like that. So why we test is quite important. So let's have a look at how we start testing. First of all, we rely on our contributors. And instead of just letting our contributors go off and go wild at certain products, sometimes that's useful, but a lot of the times people trying to get into testing, they don't know the best way to look at an application. We have Litmus, litmus.mozilla.org. It's just a test case management tool. It allows you to write your test cases, put it in there, and then people can start using them. The next thing that we heavily rely on are fuzzers. A fuzzer is a tool that will inject random bits of data into your application. So if you, a good example of this would be something that happened to Twitter probably about 18 months ago. People started injecting cross-site scripting, bits of JavaScript in there. The reason why it seemed to get through is that they'd spent a lot of effort in making sure that their developers knew, this is what cross-site scripting is. This is how it's going to affect you, and suddenly people are going to start getting hit by it. So people just put this little bit of snippet into their tweet, and it suddenly stole access, so people could tweet as another person. It so randomly started tweeting against your account, and this is just by loading a browser, going into twitter.com, looking at your Twitter stream. Number of websites have had it. A good example of the one that's happened to Mozilla was support.mozilla.com allows people to upload avatars for their user. One of our white hat hackers, a contributor who tends to help out on a number of projects, decided to see what would happen if he were to inject some PHP code into his image and then upload it and see what would happen. He uploaded it, and suddenly he had access to certain things that he shouldn't have had. And this is just by uploading an image. It's not even trying to, like, a bug in the software. It's a bug in the way that the server was set up. It had extra mods running on the Apache server. This is another form of another bug that we need to concentrate on. And this is why we rely on fuzzers, because there's times where we can't just think of every different scenario. It's nice to just inject random bits of data. The next tool that we use is a tool called Selenium. It's a UI automated testing framework. Well, it's not even a testing framework. It's a UI driving framework. When coupled with the testing framework, allows you to do tests. It allows people to drive browsers. So it'll start up Firefox, tell Firefox what to do. So go through different pages and say, this is, click on this button, click on that button. Is the following text here? Things like that. It allows you to test mobile web applications. So you can start up, say, iPhone and start running it. Android, you can start running it against it. At the moment, it's only those two. It's an open source project that is run entirely by volunteers. There are people within organizations who get paid to do Selenium code, but all the code is still open source, publicly available, so anyone can use it. And then finally, we need to concentrate on load testing, performance testing. Firefox 4 is imminent. We're going to be releasing it very shortly. And as an example of what happened with the last release, we had somewhere in the region of 2 billion downloads. So we need to make sure that our servers can actually handle that. So that means if we're downloading 2 billion times, it tends to mean that getfirefox.com is going to have 2 billion people hitting it. So we need to be able to handle that volume. And we need to be able to handle huge spikes, because when we announce it, that it's going out, websites like TechCrunch, Engadget, things like that are going to say, Firefox is available, go get it. So we're going to see huge spikes against our web servers. And we need to be able to make sure that we set up our load balancers correctly, that we set up the way we connecting to databases and things like that, because a lot of the pages are done dynamically according to which browser you're hitting getfirefox.com with. So if you get it with Firefox, is going to say, well, you just need to upgrade, do the following. But if you hit it with Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Opera, we need to handle all these different mechanisms. So load testing is very important to the way we do things. So my job mainly revolves around Selenium. I am the Python maintainer on Selenium. So I need to, and Mozilla is a Python company. Most of the time, anything that's not that's server related tends to be written in Python. We used to do PHP, but PHP doesn't scale, so we need to look at other languages. So what is Selenium? Selenium is a cross-browser automation framework. It works on pretty much any browser that can handle JavaScript. The core of Selenium is written in JavaScript, which we inject into the browser when we start testing. So by proxy, it's also cross-platform, because browsers work on multiple platforms: Linux, Windows, Mac. And Selenium is used by Mozilla, Google, Microsoft, eBay, and many, many, many more companies, big and small, from your startups up to, IBM, that really, really large companies. So, like I said, it works on nearly all browsers. There are a few that get a bit stuck when you inject the JavaScript into it, which to be honest, the browsers that handle problems like that are used by less than 1% of the world, so we don't tend to worry about it too much. But we're also moving to Selenium 2, and Selenium 2 has mobile support. So if you want to run it on Android, if you want to run it on your iPhone, your iPad, actually it's anything that's iOS, you can start running Selenium against it. We're getting a contribution, hopefully, by a number of other mobile providers like BlackBerry, so that you can start expanding what you test on. The reason why we care about mobile is, I think it came out on Sunday that something like Google Maps, the most amount of their traffic comes from mobile. At least 60% of their traffic comes from mobile. So it's quite important. Right, so I do test automation, and test automation means I'm a developer. I work in testing, but I'm a developer. So our code, legacy code, is in Subversion, but we're moving everything onto Git now, and we tend to prefer things on GitHub just because of the great way that you can collaborate and get other people involved. Our infrastructure for running Selenium is quite extensive because we have so many different browsers that we need to check. So we have real machines. They're Apple-based machines, and they run Firefox 3.6 and 4, and Safari. The reason, if anyone wants to know why the real machines are Apple, is you can't, with their licensing, virtualize Apple software onto any other hardware. It has to be on Apple hardware if you virtualize it. So lots of companies tend to have to bend around these rules when it comes to setting up their tests. But it means that we can then virtualize other things. So we've got Windows XP, which still has a huge market share, and Windows 7. And on these that we run Firefox 3.6 and 4, IE 7 and 8, and hopefully tomorrow I'll be setting up IE 9 because that got released yesterday. And then we need to also test on Linux. So we've got Ubuntu, and we've got Firefox 3.6 and 4. You might notice that we don't really test on Google Chrome, mainly because we haven't felt the need for it to happen, because a lot of the way the JavaScript works on Google Chrome is very similar to Firefox. We're both trying to be standards compliant, so we don't have to worry about it too much. And that's the main reason why we do this. So the development environment, so on my Mac, I've got Git, Python 2.6. We use 2.6 because it's the mostly used version of Python, and still comes bundled with Linux and things like that as 2.6. So it means that we don't have to tell people that they need to upgrade to, say, 2.7 or 3 if they want to contribute Selenium tests. Then obviously it's the Selenium Python bindings and an editor. I tend to use Vim mainly because Python's not a language that has static checkers in a in an IDE and things like that. So I just tend to use them. It means I can code a lot quicker, and when I run my code, if it breaks, I can spot a lot quicker. I also tend to do TDD, because if you do dynamic languages, TDD will save you a lot of heartache. Because if you take an example like Java or .NET, you work in Visual Studio, you work in IDE, you work in Eclipse. They tend to tell you when you've done something wrong. They'll go, this won't work, the compiler's not going to like this. So you get covered a lot by like static analysis before it goes through the compiler. But because we do things with a dynamically typed language, we tend to do TDD for anything that we do. These are just a few sites that I've worked on. I've only been there about 6 months, so because I'm the automation lead for Mozilla Web QA, I tend to float between different websites. But I also get involved with the web developers. I try help them make their code testable. So if they start building things and they don't have tests around this certain area, and they don't feel that they can test it because it's going to cause it's too much work, things like that. I tend to try get involved in those situations, so I can go, right, we need to fix this, and this is where we're going wrong. So let's have a quick look at one of the tests that I've been working on. This is Python. It's a Selenium test, and it's just checking a few things. This amount of code will load up a browser, go into a certain bit and check that a certain pane is visible. In this case, it's looking for personas. For those who use Firefox, personas allows you to customize the skin of Firefox. So the discovery pane is the new add-ons, like in Firefox 3.6 and before, there used to be a little window that would pop up for add-ons. This is now like just another tab and is powered by a website, and it's called Discovery Pane. So it says that this section is available, and we should always make sure that there's at least 5 different personas, just to get people enticed, and then they can go look at it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How does this Python code then get that data? It gets converted to JavaScript, which then uses the DOM or something like that to query for these things?
Yeah, exactly that. So I'm going to answer your question with my next slide. No, it's a very good question. So what I mean is that what I showed you there is not really Selenium. It's a design pattern that we use above Selenium. It makes things a lot more readable. And the reason why is that your test code should be as important as your production code. So, you don't want to have to spend a day having to refactor your test code because you've not written it in the way that you would write your production code. A good example of this is what I term magic numbers. Is that if it's 1, do this. If it's 2, do this. If it's 3, do this. But there's nothing to tell me what 1 is, what 2 is, what 3 is, what they represent, and things like that. This is the reason why, if you speak to people in the .NET world, they'll hate Visual Basic, because Visual Basic 6, quite an old language now, that's what people used to do all the time. And it used to drive other developers really, really mad. So reusability really matters, because if you're doing TDD, you are writing production code. It's just not going to be seen by the general public. It just means that other people can use it. Yeah?
TDD, what was that exactly again?
Test-driven development. No, so TDD, test-driven development, is the idea that you write your test first and then your production code. So there are a number of ways to do it and things like that, but it's more the concept that you need to always try adhere to. It's not like, because you'll get people go, right, if you do test-driven development, you need to, it needs to test the smallest amount of code, and it needs to, you've got to fake this bit of, like, if it needs to speak to a database, you need to fake that. If it needs to speak to the disk, you need to fake that, because it needs to try to be as fast as possible. But I've seen developers try do this, and they've had really good intentions. But the amount of code around it to fake going to the disk, to fake going to the database, was so much that they spent a day just trying to write these stubs of code just for their tests. Where if you just use it as a concept because the concept tries to make you think about what you're writing. So, because if you write your test first, then you're concentrating on what your production code's going to be. Because you go, my test is going to make sure it does that. And you start thinking about how you design code, your websites. How you design, like if you're designing a framework around stuff, you go, oh, this is how the API is going to look, because it makes my code easier to test this way if I do it that way. But if my code is easier to test by making an API this shape, that means users will find it really, really easy to use because it's this shape and it just makes sense to them. It's very intuitive. So suddenly you start thinking of your code as very intuitive. Is that, I don't have all day to look up how to use framework X or framework Y. I just want to go, like in Python. The reason why I really, really like Python, if I can find a taskbar. Okay. Let's see if I can make this go. Nope. I have no idea where my mouse is. There we are. Can people see that all right? Okay. So what I was doing before coming over is that I'm trying to rewrite how Selenium 2 handles the Python version of Selenium 2 drives Firefox. There's a number of core issues because unfortunately up until about 7 months ago, the Python bindings were maintained by someone else. They've decided to leave the project, and then they were dropped for a good 6 months. And for the last month, I've been trying to bring them back up to speed. So the API is all there, but there's a number of key issues. The Python bindings don't currently work with Firefox 4 for Selenium 2. They work with Selenium 1, which is the framework we tend to work around. But I have a really bad habit of forgetting programming languages. I tend to work in a handful. So I'll work in Java, I'll work in Python, I'll work in .NET, I'll work in JavaScript. If I have to, I'll work in Ruby. And languages are really, really easy to pick up once you understand their idioms, so like how they revolve. And the reason, but because I work in so many languages, I tend to forget the language as well. I forget what call does what does this. So like, if I, like in .NET, if I want to add to a list, it's just the list variable .add and whatever I want to add. But in Python, it's not add, it's append. And it's just the syntax that I really forget. But in Python, I can go, right, well, the G equals the curly parentheses just creates a dictionary. I was trying to work out something for a dictionary. So I created a dictionary and go, well, what are the different types of calls I can make against this dictionary? And that's what the DIR is. Then I go, oh, update kind of looks what I want. No. If I do some help, that's exactly what I need. And so this is one of the reasons why I really like Python, is I can just open up a REPL, go, is this kind of what I need? Yep, it works, perfect. But so by doing this is that you can start seeing APIs, and this is how people tend to go, right, and this is how Python people are going to look at my API. So if I do TDD, this is how I'm going to start working against it. And then you start going, oh, it's going to speak to this class, speak to this class. I can start splitting things out. There's duplicate code here. I can move it about. But because you've got your tests that you wrote first, you can move code about. And as long as what comes out of your API at the end and your test pass, no one's going to care. Because they push something into a black box, they get something out of a black box, and they don't care how it worked. So this is why people tend to care about TDD, and why people the name is buzzwordy, so don't be careful how you use it. But it's the concept you always need to really care about, like how you care about the quality of your code. Right. So I'm just going to show you some code. That's not what I wanted. So this is kind of how our tests look. The design pattern that we use is being coined page object model. And what it does is it takes a page. So if you have a look at, like, if you go to a different, your average website, and you go, this is the home page, this is the login page, things like that. You create a object like you would if you were creating objects in your programming language, and they represent that page. And then all it is a really nice design pattern, and it makes code extremely easy to read, because you can start, because it's test code, we don't have to worry about how quick we can make a compile and things like that. We make method names as long as we want, as long as they're descriptive in the way we need them to be. So, like, where's a good example? So, going back to your question of how does it drive the browser? Is that, in this case, we've said, we have highlighted discovery pane, which is our object for that page. I would like the mission section. What that does is that goes into so that goes into our page, and it tells Selenium that, right, I need the mission section, which is this property just here. in this case, all I'm caring about is the text. So what Selenium then does, I've told Selenium that I would like the text from this bit of the page. So Selenium then, because by this time there's already a browser open, it will do it'll do some JavaScript to access the DOM, get the information, and then return it. But this is because, like I said, we've already injected Selenium into the page when we started up the browser, and we can control it. So if we have a look, that's what I want. Okay, that's not that way. Right, well, but in this case, just we can just say, like, you know, if we want the where add-ons is, which is just the H2 in the top left as you're looking at it, we can we can tell Selenium grab it that way. Really, really cool. But you know, driving browsers with Selenium is quite easy. It's literally do this, do that. You're just speaking to an API with your favorite language. Really easy. But if I wanted to have a look at iPhone. Sorry, I don't have an iPhone, so I can't actually show you, but I'll use a simulator. The same site is now easily testable. And this is because, you know, we need to care about testing this way. And we need to be able to show how we test things and things like that. And we need to really start doing things on iPhones and things like that. But again, it's just, as you can see from here, all I was doing was speaking to an API, saying, create an object, which is going to represent my iPhone, and then tell it to go get that page. The reason why we chose the word get is that it's doing HTTP calls. Get is quite intuitive to how people do things on HTTP. Yeah?
So you specify how to get to a page in Selenium code, but maybe if you have a very complex website, it may be much easier to specify by clicking through.
Yep.
Is there a way that you can record a sequence of mouse clicks and then convert them to Selenium code, which then gets injected? So
You could. I would highly recommend not doing record and replay. Record and replay will generate what the recorder thinks you're trying to do, which it will do a fairly good job. However, on web applications these days, everything is so highly laced with like Ajax. Does everyone know what Ajax is? So Ajax makes the client, the browser, and the server, like the communication between is very, very chatty. So with a record and replay, how do you tell it that you want to specify it clicks this button, which is then going to fire off these loads of events and things like that? Because Selenium is just JavaScript, we need to kind of guess the events that you're actually trying to do. So with a click is made up of 3 events. It's the mouse down, the press, and mouse up. So, and we need to kind of say, this is what you're trying to do. Which can, if you start doing record and replay, can be quite hard to do.
I didn't mean record and replay, I meant record, convert to Selenium script, and then you can even edit by hand or something.
Yeah, no, you can. You can.
To save, just to automatize part of
You,
the script writing.
Yeah, you can, but to be honest, if you have a good, for example, like the code that I showed, if you have a very good page object, writing Selenium tests is like recording Selenium tests is going to take longer than actually writing it by hand. And you know, like I say, with record and replay, there's a number of interesting issues that tend to come up. Also, people tend to rely on record and replay, which is not very helpful. So, one of the things I tend to do while I'm working is help out in the Selenium forums, and people go, "I've tried to record using against the site, and it uses jQuery, and it's got this really nice slide in, and you know, how do I when I click it, it doesn't actually fire that click." So it's like, oh, okay, well, have you tried the following different types of events that you can tell Selenium to do? This is kind of where Selenium fell down in Selenium 1 and why we're moving to Selenium 2, is that if I do, if I do that, what that's going to do is it's going to try find the popular tab on the page and then fire a click. With Selenium 1, people would say, oh, on mouse up, fire this event in their JavaScript. So you would go, right, a click in Selenium, and then, well, that won't work. And then you try to do a mouse down, that won't work. You try to do a mouse up, suddenly your test works. One of the things about Selenium 2 is that we try to do things more natively. We've got, in this case, we've got some Xcode that drives the UI web view, and it'll go, right, this is the element, and I'm going to click on it. And we use things like accessibility, the accessibility API in operating systems to access it and control it that way. So if we do that, in theory, it should change. And it's using, it's coming through here. So we can see everything's running locally for me at the moment. It's using the local version of the website and things like that. But by doing a click, we've simplified how it does a click, is that we do things more natively. You know, a good example of another way of doing it is Internet Explorer. It's got very good hooks for testability. I would say almost comparable with Firefox, in that you can drive things, but you have to, the core of Internet Explorer for Selenium is now written in C++, because it now works it's trying to, when we send through a click, we actually want to mean a click. It's one of these, like, Selenium 1 solved 80% of the problem, and now we're trying to solve the other 20%. The 80% was people wanting to do file uploads. You can't do it in JavaScript because the browser sandbox will block you. You don't want to go to a website and suddenly your password file has disappeared, you know, because it's been uploaded. Because JavaScript, in theory, could do that, but you know, browser manufacturers have stopped doing that, stopped that going through. But now we're starting to solve the harder problems, and this is why, like with mobile, because we understand what the problem is now, we can start doing things a lot harder, like doing the harder things like mobile, file uploads. The other thing that people like to do nowadays is put WYSIWYG editors in browsers. But there's so many different layers of things that are there. To your eye, you don't notice any of it. But there's iframes upon iframes upon iframes, and it, you know, like if you type something, it moves things through the layers. So you've got to care about it that way. And that's it from me. Anyone got any other questions for me? Yep.
So when you run lots of tests, you want these tests to be happening in a defined state. Is there a way of resetting, in some sense, the browser to its initial state of each test, or do you have to close it?
Every time we start up a browser, it starts it up from fresh. So in Firefox, everything revolves around profiles. So every time we start up a test for, or automated test using Firefox, we create a brand new profile and then say use this profile. Because if something goes horribly wrong in starting up the browser, we need to, we don't want it to then continue on into other builds. Mozilla is an international company. There's, I think it's about 10 people who work for Mozilla in the UK. There's people through Europe, people through Asia, people through the US. So, and what we do is that we have continuous integration servers running all the time. Someone commits code into like Git or Subversion or Mercurial. Our continuous integration servers notice the change, download all the source code, build it up, run all the tests, run like anything it needs to around it, like if it needs to do any minification of JavaScript, obfuscation of JavaScript, you know, things that make loading pages quicker, and things like spriting of images. This is all automated. And then it'll deploy to our staging servers, normally straight away. So, you know, we tend, like on addons.mozilla.com, we tend to deploy to our staging server on average every 15 minutes. And there's no human interaction. So we write code, it's on our staging server.
So when it passes the tests, it gets staged and then goes live?
It'll go to staging. Staging, we tend to have exploratory testers who will just check that the UI actually looks decent. And if there's things that we can't test through automation, like file uploads and things like that, especially for add-ons, we need to check that people can upload zippies. Because if you can't upload a zippy, there's no point in having an add-on site. So we have exploratory testers who go through like the more difficult things. So they don't have to worry about I test this bit, I test that bit. It's just like, these are the hard bits that we can't automate, and we need to just concentrate on that because everything else will be covered through our automated tests. At a developer level, tests that I would have written, tests that test engineers would have written, because there's a number of different levels of testers through the company, depending on what type of thing you work on. So yeah, we tend to, we've got all these different levels of testing that needs to be done before we can push to live. But we push to production once a week. Tends to be every Thursday, I think it's about 4 o'clock Pacific time. We tend to push to production. So, when people are getting home on a Thursday evening, there's a new version of the site, so we need to make sure things are working properly there. So yeah.
Any more questions? I have another question.
Yeah.
So in the course I talked about testing, and I said something like often 80% of the bugs is in 20% of the code. And it makes a lot of sense to try and look at parts of the code or find parts of the code that are very complicated and focus your testing efforts there. Do you find something like that at Mozilla as well?
Where most of the bugs that I tend to come across tend to be on languages that don't do well with test automation or test-driven development. So JavaScript is one of them, one of those languages. It's really hard to do TDD. Because you got different, the way you got you develop closures and things like that, and scoping and things like that. You can't always inject other objects in neatly without having to do all these other things. But with the initiatives like the CommonJS initiative, trying to make a common way to write JavaScript, it also means that we can go, these are the ways that we need to be able to test our code as well. So, and it makes it nicer that way. So a lot of our bugs that I've seen tend to be JavaScript bugs or security bugs, because security testing is really, really, really hard. I have no idea how a lot of these bugs tend to crop up, but it's also one of the fields that I don't concentrate in either. But yeah, that's a lot of our bugs tend to be security bugs, especially on the websites. On the browser side, it's lots of things can go horribly wrong. I know a number of people at Google, and they've been working on Chrome OS, and they're on I think they call it the Canary branch, which is their pre-developer branch, and by accident someone dropped the network stack, so it uploaded Chrome OS, the new version, from the night. But you couldn't actually do anything because there was no networking. It had been dropped by accident when it had been built. So, a lot of bugs also come up through building, how you build your software. But my philosophy, and this is just my opinion, if you stick to single responsibilities, you can make your code a lot more testable, because you just go, this object will be doing the following, and this is how I access it. And when you start doing that, but if you start having, a class that's say 1,000 lines of code, it makes things really hard to test, and that's when you tend to get bugs, because you go, oh, I've moved this into private, I can't access private methods, so what am I supposed to do? Oh, well, I'll just hope it works. That's where I've seen people go horribly wrong in the past.
Any more questions?
Why is it that sometimes Flash crashes in Firefox? Is it on the Flash side or is it on the Firefox side?
It depends answer. It depends on what is the cause of it. I'm a big advocate for Flash disappearing, because Flash tends to be the main reason why Firefox crashes. It's the main, the plugin will crash and then will take down the browser at the same time. when you've got things that are coming out like HTML5, you know, you can do videos, you can do really cool canvas apps and things like that. You know, you're starting to see where Flash is going to fail. Flash is going to be really good for video, and this is why people really like Silverlight in the .NET world. It's really good for video. And once like the video tag is really ingrained into all browsers and really pushed through, you know, like people stop worrying about which codec to use and things like that you'll see in the press these days. It's like, you know, I've done this codec, it's great, but then, you know, Google stopped supporting it. I can't use it in Google Chrome, things like that. So it depends. I've seen lots of really buggy Flash apps that can just take down any browser. And Flash is a really good example of a way to develop something without being able to really test it. Because there's no like frameworks around it. There's no easy access into your application to test it. The reason why something like Selenium is so widely used by like Google and Microsoft and things like that is that we're accessing the DOM, and anyone can access the DOM. But if you put like Silverlight or Flash into the DOM, is that you've got this really open API, and right in the middle of it, you've got this closed API that you can't actually see, you can't do anything with, you can't interact with. So, you know, when you've got huge swathes of a really nice API, and then you've got that, well, I'm not saying the DOM is a nice API, it's a workable API, but, you know, compared to something like Flash or Silverlight, it's quite horrible. Hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's suggested applications, not Firefox itself or Flash itself.
Yeah. By the end of the year. Yeah. But hopefully by the end of the year, Firefox 7 is going to be out. And the key feature of Firefox 7 is one of the things that like Internet Explorer and Google Chrome have, is that every tab will have its own process. So if that tab with Flash crashes, you just kill that process, but the rest of the browser can stay up. Which is one of the like most asked for features, but it's actually one of the hardest features to actually ingrain, because the Mozilla community revolves around add-ons. You know, everyone has their favorite add-on for like, you know, if you want to have a secure connection to the internet, or like how you go through to sites, and you might want to use Tor. You know, you can only use Tor on Firefox. You can't use it on Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. And it's because we give people the options to do things. One of the misconceptions that people have is that Firefox is trying to be the best browser on the planet. It's not true. We're trying to be a browser that gives people choice. You know, when Firefox originally came out, there was Internet Explorer. That was it. There was Netscape. That died. But from Netscape grew Firefox. And all it was out there to do was give people choice. And by giving people choice, we gave them add-ons, which gave them more choice, but means our life's a little bit harder, you know, when we want to go, right, we need to split every tab into a process, because like if we split like the process like that, there could be an add-on running in that browser, in that tab, that we need to know about and care about. Because if we care about it, if we like show the user we're caring about it, then they go to care about like, you know, using the browser as well. So it makes things a bit harder.
In this context, what about the sandboxing? Instead of creating two separate processes, we use one process and we use sandboxing in the memory, so we can find for example, add-on or plugin, the jump that they could do in the memory. If we do this, then it's more secure.
Yeah. And we are doing that. We've got Firefox 4 has a concept of compartmentalizing JavaScript. which is, that's one of our major features with the next version, is that, if something crashes, that we still have access to other things, and we can start doing that. But when you develop software, everything you have to do is iterative. You can't just go, right, here's a whole application. It's never going to work. Big bang always fails. So you need to do things iteratively and just go, well, I'll do this for this version, I'll do that the next thing. But Firefox 7 is in development right now. So is Firefox 5 and Firefox 4, which will be out soon. Because we have multiple tracks that we need to maintain. Because when we, with splitting off the processes, we need to know how we're going to do it, and we need to start prototyping and things like that. So we're already doing things like that. So something like that's already there. It's just the other bits, making sure that we can tell the OS that there's this process and things like that, and go, well, this process has gone horribly wrong. We need to take fault of it. Gone. So.
Simply, if you've got these add-ons.
Yeah.
So if you're saying you're going to be sandboxing, I think I understand. So I suppose you would have to have the add-on in each process as well. Would you have to?
I don't know all the details of it. I just know the bits that I need to, because I tend to work in a number of different projects. I tend to have to know what I call a helicopter view of everything. So for Selenium, I need to know how the JavaScript is going to work, because one of the things that people tend to do, companies, is they'll develop an application, but they'll hide it behind a self-certified certificate. So, but now if you need to get around a self-certified certificate, which you can do, you need to know this, but the JavaScript magic that does it to get around it. But with Firefox 4, one of the biggest problems on the Selenium project is things have been compartmentalized. So we were running on this thread and going, ooh, there's a self-cert that we need to take care of, and we'll fire something through to another thread. But now compartmentalizing it goes, no, you can't do that. So it makes life difficult. So I don't know all the ins and outs, I just know how it affects me with Selenium.
Compartmentalized that you mentioned now, is it about the thread or one process that they fork the process? They create the child.
I think they just, at the moment it's just internal forking. I don't know. I don't know the exact ins and outs.
If we do the forking over the parent process, then we can put the security measure on each, child process, and you can control.
Yeah. I don't know all the ins and outs, so I can't really give you a more definitive answer.
Any more questions?
No.
So then I suggest to set the speaker.
Miguel? Oh, it's all right.
Once I finish here, I need to switch off the video recorder.
Yeah, go for it. Oh, God.
Then you. Oh, okay. Just listen. Run over slightly. That's fine. It's the last week of term, so I think the students would have left if they had another lecture. Okay, now I'll just stop here.